All right. Well, it's 5:59, so I guess I will begin. So welcome everyone. I'm very excited to be here to talk about our draft of our middle school plan. I'm Dr. Patrick Sullivan. I'm very proud superintendent of Cohasset Public Schools. And I should say that it's great that we're even able to talk about the possibility of this and of bringing back students into a hybrid model. Clearly everybody wants to bring back students as much as we can. We have to look at what's the safest for our students right at this point. But really, because of the fact that rates are low right now in Cohasset, and we're in a situation where we're even able to afford this. Safety is the most paramount thing we do. I always say that as a superintendent, that is my main job, is to make sure everyone's safe, the staff is safe, the students are safe, and to create environments that provide that and provide education. So in times like these, that does become paramount to us. I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the meeting in a minute, but I want to make sure I introduce the folks who are with us. So first I have Dr. Leslie Scollins, who is our assistant superintendent. And I have Barbara Sawanka. Barbara Sawanka is our new Director of Student Services, already hitting the ground running, doing a fabulous job. It's not the greatest way to introduce people to someone on Zoom, but welcome, Barbara. Happy to have you here. And of course, you all know John Mills, who's done a just absolute fabulous job in his first year as principal. Although I'm sure, John, if you're feeling like me, probably feels like 6 years rolled into one at this point. So we're all here, and the purpose of the meeting obviously is to gain input into our draft. The draft that we sent out is a draft. It's a draft that had a lot of thought put into it, as you could see. But we are here to listen, to try to gain input so that we can create a better product for you. Nothing is absolutely set in stone, but we feel right now that this is a plan that we can forge forward with confidently. A little bit about our timeline. We do have forums this week. This is our third of 4 forums. We have a forum on Monday. And August 5th, we have a school committee meeting. The school committee meeting will be when leadership will present the draft roadmap for approval to the school committee. And that will be, of course, pending our Cohasset Teacher Association negotiations. August 10th, our plan is at this point to draft, or I should say, to send out a final draft to families. At that time, we're going to be, as part of that draft, asking families to let us know if their child or children will be coming to the hybrid model, if that is what we're presenting at that point, or if indeed they may be looking to have their child do a fully remote option, which we will be presenting as an option for everyone. And that will be, more on that will be in our final draft as well. And then the idea is that we would want that information by August 17th. And we would make any needed and additional changes at that point. I should say that our bus routes are actually in a better position than they were last night when I talked about them. We're in a position now where we feel we've formulated our bus routes pretty well. We're working with a couple of parents who are experts in this to help us. It's really been a community effort along with our Director of Finance and Operations. But we are in a position this year where we can only offer bus routes based on the restrictions of bus seating, which is 1 per seat. And in a 73-person bus, it really gives us about 26 students we can sit in the bus. Maybe a little bit more and we are going to be putting family members together on buses. I know in my household that won't sit that well, but it is for a safety measure, we're able to have those family members in the same bus. And we will get those bus routes out to you by no later than August 17th, but I believe they'll be coming out sooner than that. And of course, the 6th grade is part of that bus route. So middle school, the 7th and 8th graders, we will not be able to offer you bus transportation. We have to stick to the law, which says at this point, K to 6 outside of a 2-mile radius. New information has come out since I did publish the draft. That information includes fall remote learning guidance, which we'll be incorporating into our next draft. Guidance for courses requiring additional safety information. So that includes physical education classes, band, chorus, theater, and what the restrictions and safety measures will be placed around those courses. That'll be in the new draft. And as many of you probably know, the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, and the Massachusetts Teachers Association came to an agreement, a memorandum of understanding that would allow teachers some additional days before they do meet with students. And that really fits into our phased approach. It does probably necessitate a calendar shift. I do not actually make the decision on calendar. I'll make the recommendation to school committee, and they will make that calendar shift. It is set in the MOU that we would not be starting beyond September 16th unless we do a waiver for that. But you'll be hearing more about that in the coming days. And when I have official word on what that calendar looks like, I will get that out to you. And that will probably be after the school committee meeting on the 5th. And the school committee may have many policy items to deliberate and to vote on, including attendance policy, final policies on masks, various safety policies that you saw alive in the draft if you read it. So I should mention that we are currently in negotiations with the CTA. And although there was a lot of input from CTA members in the formulation of the draft, as you can see on the draft, it was a really comprehensive and collaborative effort. That should not be mistaken as actual negotiations. We have a unionized workforce, and whenever you do have a unionized workforce, you do have the need to work with them, and it's only right to do so, to bargain how the plan that we put forward impacts their negotiated responsibilities and working conditions. So those talks are ongoing. So with all that preliminary material out of the way, we will get into the format of the forums. The format of the forums is we will go through a presentation of the plan. It's usually at this time that I thank that middle school principal we have, John Mills, for creating the presentation for us and working with me, but he's right here. So he's actually going to be able to walk through part of his own presentation. And then we'll do a brief overview, and then we'll get into questions and answers. I realize that we're not going to be able to go through every question you have. I mean, there are 86 participants live here on Zoom. I know there are more on Facebook. We'll get to as many as we can, but please send a question to me, or if it's a building specific plan, to Principal Mills, and we'll get back to you. Your input is really important, and it's helping us to craft the plan. One last note is that we do have some pretty good funding sources available for us as we move forward, one of which is a school reentry plan, which offers $225 per student in our district. It comes to about $328,000. So we're working on what we can best spend that on. And these forums are timed so that you can help us in addressing that. So it's nice to hear what is important to you and what you really want to do. So with that, I'm going to switch over to our Prezi and share my screen here. So this was created by Principal Mills. And I'm just going to walk through some highlights of it and then get into some questions. So in terms of our reentry model, of course, we all want to bring back students in a full person if we can possibly do so. But we were tasked to look at what are called pressure tests. And the pressure test by the commissioner asked us to look at desk, the way we set out desks at 3-foot and 6-foot distances, and to consider a 3-foot and 6-foot distance in everything that might happen in a school. With all of that, we determined that we could not safely fit the amount of students we needed to fit in the building if we were bringing everyone back certainly at a 6-foot distance, but at a 3-foot distance. We just couldn't fit the bodies in at a 6-foot distance. And 3-foot distance, it was pushing it. I think Principal Mills will talk about this, but he's done some analysis where, given his regular schedule, about 50% of the classes would not fit in the rooms, nor could we figure out ways to actually safely have them in the building if we had everyone in. However, at the hybrid, busing, of course, is another major factor that inhibits the return of all students, and I talked about that we'd literally have to double, maybe triple our bus fleet to have everybody be able to come in to a place where we couldn't fit them all safely, given the guidelines we would need to fit them in. But we do feel confident that we could fit them in and present a very productive hybrid model. So of course, we're looking at this hybrid model at both the elementary and at the secondary level. Although we're going to be talking primarily at the secondary level today, the middle school, I do want you to understand that we did pick these hybrid models based on the needs of the students. And we felt that the need for that connectivity between the teacher and the student and the basic skill development needs of our elementary students really required a model that did not allow them to go a full week without being in person, and I mean in person, physically in person, face-to-face with their teacher. So what we have at the elementary level is we have 2 cohorts. We have an A cohort who will go Monday and Tuesday in person, and a B cohort who will go Thursday and Friday in person, with a Wednesday in between that will be a remote day for all. And of course, on the days when those cohorts are not in person, they'll be receiving remote learning. And they have a nice model where they're alternating between specialists and core teachers running those remote learning. And we're looking at ways at all levels to bolster the synchronous nature of our remote learning model to increase its robust the way it is. It will be put out to the public as we go forward. And at the secondary hybrid model, we've decided that the 1 week in-person learning and 1 week remote learning will be best for our students, given the independent nature of the secondary student and the fact that we feel like we can really look at creating lessons in a remote mode and units in a remote mode, and that we can toggle between times when they're in person and really are working with that connected model in person, and then times when we can do some reinforcement in a remote model. All of our school plans include specific safety indicators for the wearing of masks. All students grade 2 through grade 12 will be required to wear masks. It's not a suggestion, it's a requirement. And social distancing, we'll be having social distancing protocols put throughout all of our buildings, at least 3-foot distance. Of course, masks will come with mask breaks. Well, we can talk about that this more when we get into the questions, but mask breaks are required, 2 mask breaks at every level. We'll do more. The way I'm looking at mask breaks, and we all are, is that there'll be breaks that are prescribed for different cohorts and different groupings where you'll just go and do the break. And then there'll be breaks that are needed based on the fact that, there'll be times when our students will need to have a break from a mask, and we'll be able to go outside, do that at a proper social distance. And also our cleaning protocols are all sanctioned by the Center for Disease Control, and they're all being followed. And we'll have outlines for everything that our cleaners have to do based on CDC guidelines. Communication, I talked about this a bit in my intro, but we will be asking after we put out our next draft and that'll have more information about what our remote learning only model will be. But we'll be asking for parents to let us know if their individual students will be coming back in the model that we're advocating for, or if they're going to need to be taught, and that for a variety of reasons in that remote learning model. We're asking that people make that decision with the thought that probably they're going to be in that remote model if they choose it, potentially for the year. However, we do understand that there could be flexibility in that, but we really need to get as much of a commitment as we can on that when we ask for that. So without further ado, I will go back to some of these features as we get into it, but I want to let Principal Mills kind of walk us through what his building model will be like at Cohasset Middle School.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dr. Sullivan. Now we're talking about the hybrid model. Once again, the state had asked each district and each building to create plans for remote learning, for hybrid learning, and for fully face-to-face in-person learning. like Dr. Sullivan had explained, we looked at the in-person and we didn't believe that we could maintain the guidance around safety, around social distancing. That became impossible. So we're focused on the hybrid, and this is the hybrid plan now. Our cohort, the organization would be, the student body would be divided in half alphabetically. It's worked out to be, it's about A to the middle of the L's, and then the next part of the alphabet to Z. They're going to rotate on a weekly basis. So one group, we'll call them Group A or Cohort A, would be in person for their learning model, while Group B simultaneously will be home at the end of the week. For the following week, the two cohorts switch and alternate between in-person and remote. This differs obviously from the elementary school, which is a smaller interval of time every 2 days or 2.5 days, they alternate. Our in-person learning component, I took the guidance from our working group. Our working group was made of faculty, department chairs, parents, and last month, at the end of remote learning in June, we also met as a faculty and talked about, how would we do this better if we had to do it again? A lot of that informed our approach to how to set up this hybrid model. One of the very first pieces that we heard is that for students, whether in, but really out of school, the remote learning students, they need a simpler schedule and one in which there's more predictability. There aren't as many moving pieces. Traditionally, our schedule consists of 62-minute periods. Kids take 7 classes. They rotate. Every day, 2 classes drop. They don't meet. And we found that during the remote learning, that became a lot for kids and teachers to sort of keep up with. So as you see, our schedule is flattened out. It's much simpler. The same classes would occur at the same time every day during the week. This would necessitate a shorter period. They're going to be 44-minute classes, which we believe would be easier for students who are home in that remote learning model. We've always had a utility period, but we've always incorporated that with lunch. In this model, we're moving it to the end of the day so that kids can get a jump on their homework. They can go back and get extra help if they're in person. If they're remote, they could reach out to teachers. We've also made the first period a little bit longer because we know with more of our students having to drive, it's going to necessitate, there's kids are going to be coming in maybe a little bit later. And we've tried to build that in and predict. And then the strength too of this flattened schedule is it still allows our teacher teams to meet regularly and meet every day to coordinate things like homework, to make sure that our kids aren't being overwhelmed, but also to integrate the curriculum as much as possible so that students ideally would be working maybe on projects that support their learning in a couple of classes. Last year, we did a project-based learning in 6th and 7th grade, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and Hidden Figures. Our teachers have already spoken about this providing them the opportunity to kind of create those learning moments. So we do have time built in for teachers to collaborate both with kids and with each other. Okay. Click. There we go. And as I said, half of our kids will be remote learning. The expectation would be that when students are at home remote learning, that they're still going to synchronously access the in-person learning instruction. In other words, they know that their first period class, their math class, starts at 8:15. The expectation is that they would join that teacher's Zoom at 8:15 as if they were walking in from the hallway and sliding into their desk, except it might be a desk or a kitchen table. This, we hope, would really enhance our remote learning students' sense of connectedness to the curriculum, to their teachers, and really to their peers, to their friends. So our teachers will work on, beginning classes with everybody, half of the kids remote, half of the kids in person. And that comes from some of the feedback that we got about the remote learning experience, that students often felt like isolated or alienated. I think this would once again enhance some of that sense of connectedness. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. Now I'm back. I'm back.
Okay.
a little rough tonight. Okay, good.
Yeah. So how does the model come together? These are some of the details, and hopefully it answers some of your questions. Unlike the remote learning period in the spring, where students received credit or no credit, our kids will be assessed using our traditional grading scale, A through F, 0 to 100. And their learning will be assessed that way, whether it's remote or in person. We hope that's going to increase the sense of it counting. From a lot of our kids during the remote period, they felt like they weren't sure. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel like it, quote unquote, counted. Our students' learning is paramount to us right after their safety. So we are, like the other schools in the district, using a traditional grading scale. We're going to work on the instructional model with our teachers so that materials will be available electronically for our remote learning students, just the way they would be for our kids in person. Obviously, the exception would be things like textbooks that all students might receive, or maybe a novel that, let's say an ELA, everyone's reading the same book, kids will still have that as well. As I mentioned, this gives teachers a chance to cooperate. In the event that we do have to go to full remote learning, okay, I'm going to go back to any last details. This is the fourth bullet. Students participating in learning remotely are going to be expected to, once again, follow same behavioral expectations that they would in person. They're going to be expected to log in at the beginning of their classes. Attendance will be taken, and really conduct will be expected as if they were in class, like appropriate behavior. And we'll lay out a document to parents, an explanation to parents and students for what it looks like to be a successful middle school student, and what are our expectations behaviorally, what sort of responsibilities should our students be willing and to take, and certainly to be supported with when they struggle. And that's as I speak about like an etiquette, but that's still forthcoming. Our full remote learning model, should we have to switch from a hybrid to a full remote model, basically we've talked to the teachers about approaching this year, assuming that they're going to have to teach remotely. In other words, don't try to create 2 or 3 different lessons. Don't try to create different experiences for different kids. Beyond, certainly we differentiate for kids, but be ready to teach remotely and, work with the students who are in front of you. Should we have to go to a full remote learning model based on public health conditions? We want to do so seamlessly and in a way that it is not going to create any turmoil or confusion for kids. The schedule is going to be maintained, and all students, as opposed to just half, would be required to log into their classes and participate that way. Grading would stay the same. We'd have additional times where our teachers could be available for some sort of help by appointment. And things like our counseling services. We've got wonderful school counselors and adjustment counselors. The support that they give our students, that would continue if we were in a full remote learning model, as well as certainly any IEP services that students are accorded. So our goal is to make a switch to a full remote learning model as seamless as possible.
Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of other things I'd like to talk about just briefly is, obviously there are safety protocols in all of these areas in the guide, and we're adding to them. And as I mentioned, guidance is coming in, and we're really going to be in a position of implementing all of these in August. So I'm not going to get into these now, but you can see masks, social distancing, guidance for lunch. All of these have specific guidance elements to them. And I talked about the calendar shifting, but the first 6 weeks, which are essential in any school year, are going to be of paramount, really paramount this year. Although the dates may change, or the date of the start may change, I want to make sure that you understand the goals won't. So the goals are really to establish safety and security. And when I say reestablish, what I mean is that every student has experienced some form of trauma, and a lot of students can come in and it won't be a big deal for them. Others, it's going to be harder to come back. They've been essentially out of school since March 13th. And we have to take that into mind. They're also coming back in an environment that's different. There'll be people wearing masks. There'll be a different format for some of the way we've typically done things. And we have to be really mindful of that. And we also have to take these new safety measures and meld them with our current safety measures, just to make sure that the students understand what to do and have the protocols no matter what scenario comes their way. Reconnecting with fellow students and former teachers is so important, particularly at the middle school level. I was a middle school principal, and that social development that happens in that time period, I don't have to tell you, is just as important, if not more so at times, than the academic development. So to connect with their fellow students, to get to know their new teachers, and also to have some closure with their former teachers. All of that is going to be really important. Understanding the expectations in both remote learning and in-person learning and how the two will come together. We're going to go over all of that and make sure that our students are ready for it, that our staff is prepared and ready to talk about that. And then we're going to engage in discussions regarding social awareness. This is such an important time in our history regarding social awareness and the events that have come up regarding human rights. All of that needs to be talked about, the racial unrest and injustice happening. And we have to look at talking about the pandemic and of course, focusing on the social emotional learning competencies of self-awareness and self-reflection. That's incredibly important right now as we move students back into our school year. Won't get into that too much, but I do want to talk just briefly about our social emotional supports. So Cohasset schools are really joyous places. One of the things that I was so proud of this year is the way that Principal Mills and his team worked with the community to give the middle school its own identity. It was a wonderful shining moment this year to see that happening and developing. And the increase of student voice, particularly at our secondary level, at our middle and high school, we need to keep that going and keep working on that. But just as importantly, we have to keep that joy. So we have to figure out ways to keep our schools joyous and to keep they're really community schools. I can feel that. When I came here a couple of years ago, it was the first thing I sensed about Cohasset is that these are schools the community cares for deeply, and they're part of what happens in our schools. And we have to continue that. And then the CASEL plan for reentry. CASEL, for those of you who don't know, is the Collaborative of Academic and Social Emotional Learning. And they've put out a plan that all educators should pay attention to as we re-enter our students. And I'm not going to read them, but you can see their main points. And we'll be very much deeply focusing on that, as well as our long-range SEL planning. We need to focus in on family resources, giving families the resources to help students through the new learning environments, through everything that they're dealing with. We want to make sure that before we start school that we're going to be giving you a good sense of what's happening in our schools, whether it's through videos or if we're able to bring people in to see the actual physical environment. It's very important that families feel comfortable and feel safe and secure with where they're leaving their students in this very difficult time. And it's important to have that same approach for our staff and our same approach for students. So we're going to give the staff resources as well. So that's just a bit of an overview of where we are, and hopefully it gives you a sense of what we plan on doing. And now we'd like to hear from you. Here's some of your questions. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to go right through the questions and read them. And then if it's best for me to answer, I'll answer. If it's best for Principal Mills to do so, we'll turn to Principal Mills. And of course, we have Dr. Scollins and Barbara here to help with questions that might pertain to their area. So the first question I have here, and I'm literally taking them in order and I'm reading them. So that's how I'm going about it. Great job last night for the high school Zoom. That's nice. I think I'm a little tongue-tied tonight because of that. I apologize if I'm finding myself uncharacteristically stumbling. I'm usually not at a loss of words, but I'm doing my best with it. Will there be support for those kids that aren't on an IEP but struggle with remote learning? So that's a great question. So one of the things, and I also should say that I'm a parent of 4 school-age children under the age of 11. All right, so my oldest is actually going into middle school next year, and I can totally relate to the struggle of getting your student involved with a remote learning scenario when you're trying to do a million other things. And some students really struggle with that format. I have a couple of those for sure. So we are working on that. We're looking at what kind of supports can we provide families and students when our teachers may be doing some face-to-face learning, but aren't able to make it as synchronous as possible. Even in the model like Principal Mills is promoting, where some of that synchronous work will be happening by filming a teacher live, doing a lesson. We still want to look for what we can provide in terms of maybe remote learning tutors who would provide some additional support for students and families as they help navigate through remote learning. So yeah, we're very much tied into that.
Yeah.
I don't know, does anybody else want to add to that at all?
I would add, besides the things like tutors, the human capital to help kids with their academics. I witnessed firsthand during remote learning the frustration that some kids experience when they have to access multiple online resources that their teachers are directing them to, but they're having trouble remembering their different logins and passwords and things like that. A lot of time can be lost and a lot of frustration can be experienced. So we're also looking into a technology platform called a single sign-on, a way that our kids would be able to log on to one place and then from there be able to seamlessly access all the different websites and tools and textbooks and things like that that their teachers might direct them to. So we're, both the human capital and the tech tools to help kids, I think, is important.
Another thing we're looking at, and this is all, we're trying to put together the puzzle with how we can use our funding, is some technology supports for you as well, so that you might be able to have access to someone who could help walk you through just some of the technology aspects of getting your student all set up. So hopefully that would all help. Next question is, please confirm that parents have the option to opt for 100% remote. So there's a couple other questions here that it relates to that, but yes, you will. The commissioner has asked that all schools allow that. We will have more information on what that will look like very shortly. If we choose 100% remote to start, if we deem it safe enough down the road, will we have the option to switch to a hybrid model? Conversely, if we choose to start the year going hybrid and switch over, so you can see where this is going. So we do want to plan, and we do want to try to provide a good answer for how we want to structure it. So we are going to ask people to, with as much assurity as they can, to go forward and to tell us that, this is the model I'm picking, and I probably will be staying with this, if at all possible. Having said that, we do realize we have to be nimble, and we have to be able to afford people to switch models if they absolutely need to. So it's not exactly 100% answer. We'd like you to try to commit, but we understand that nothing can be absolute set in stone in this particular format. Has ventilation in the school buildings been considered and addressed? Yes, it's being addressed. We are up to code on all our ventilation. I want to make clear about that. We're also looking at things like more air conditioning. Air conditioning is a little bit different than HVAC, but the idea of what we need to do to make sure the air is cool and pleasing for our students who have to wear these masks in classes. We want to make sure that it's not an additional factor. And there are some safe measures that we're putting in if the heat index gets too high to call what I'm calling a heat day and make it a remote learning experience for our students if it does get to that. So we're very in tune to that need.
Can I just get the as far as the classroom ventilation piece?
Go ahead.
When we originally looked at trying to squeeze the whole school in, it was obvious that we couldn't do it and maintain, a 3-foot buffer or social distance, let alone a 6-foot. And as Dr. Sullivan had said, with the master schedule for this year, would be about 55% of our classes couldn't run. We just wouldn't have any place for them. With the hybrid model, 100% of our classes will fit, and most of our classes will be 10 or 12 kids in a classroom that's about 785 square feet. So the demands on the ventilation system, which is up to code and up to snuff, is different. It's just going to be far fewer kids present in the classroom.
Thank you, John. The next question is, the lack of busing for some families is a real challenge. Will any consideration be given to families who do not have a parent available to drive students to and from school? Is there a possibility of increasing our bus fleet to allow a greater number of students to access busing? Not all parents are home and able to drive students. Yeah, I mean, right now we're doing what we absolutely have to do by law. We understand it's an inconvenience for some, but we are providing a K-6 outside of a 2-mile radius. In order to accommodate all of our busing needs, we would need to double our bus fleet. We can look at it, but it's doubtful that we're going to be able to provide much more in busing. Certainly, it might be a situation where it would be a lottery at best if we were able to provide busing. And I'm just not real hopeful that that's going to be something that we're able to do. I'm just being completely honest. A lot of this is the best of the bad ideas, but unfortunately, that's not something that I anticipate being able to do. With utility at the end, so kids can get help, does that mean that they will be able to go to different classrooms to get that help? That would be for you, Principal Mills.
Like the utility that we've run in the past, students have that ability. What we do is that the teacher teams regulate it, and they'll usually ask that a student double check with the teacher to make sure that he or she is available during utility, that they acquire a pass. But then to answer your question, yeah, a student could go get help from the teacher that maybe they need a little help with, that they're struggling with. So that would be within the realm. We also, in an effort to really enhance that sense of team and to make the school feel like a smaller, more welcoming place, at the end of last year or during remote, we shuffled some of the teachers' classrooms around. So now the grades are in specific parts of the building. 6th grade has their area, 7th and 8th have theirs. So it becomes even a little bit easier when a student is in utility and they're hoping to see their math teacher, when their math teacher might be right next door or right across the hall. So that, like I said, it's very, very much within the realm, and that's really the idea of the team model that we use at middle school.
Will kids doing remote learning be required to show their face when joining classes? Well, so I mean, we'll set up etiquette for Zoom, as you do when you create any Zoom module. I mean, we really want to make sure that our students are fully engaged in the learning, but we'll work that out. And if that's a question more about the fact that students might not want to be seen, there are ways we can put backgrounds up. There's lots of things we can do. And if it's more that a student is uncomfortable, as I understand that was something that happened at the middle school, they were more uncomfortable showing themselves. We're going to work through that. We do want students as engaged as possible in person, and that involves, seeing them. So yeah, that's my hope. And John, I don't know if you had anything different on that.
No, nothing different. I find through a lot of this, I try to look for the analogous situation in person. And very often in the classroom, there are situations that arise based on student need that call for a teacher to maybe step away from some accepted, behavioral expectation. As a school, we don't wear hats. Sometimes it might be a situation where a student's just more comfortable, either all year in a hat or temporarily. Sometimes in class, you've got a student who, because of a medical need, might need to get up and use the restroom, and rather than engaging in the process of asking and signing out, and an agreement is reached between the teachers and the parent and the student for a new protocol, and one that allows, that supports the student's needs. And I just see things like students who might be experiencing some anxiety on Zoom it's an analogous situation. We're happy to work with the student and family and teachers and find something that makes the student successful and comfortable.
Next question was, thank you, Principal Mills. Are you aware of concerns by the Teachers Union, CTA, on the synchronous remote access by students at home? Well, like I said, we're working through everything and negotiating with the CTA. It wouldn't be proper to really comment on that except for in general. We're going to work through that, and we're confident that we'll be able to. What technological upgrades have been made in the middle school to facilitate participation from students who are remote? We're looking at a few things. We're looking at a few technological means to be able to open up more synchronous learning for folks. That would be, better than just looking through a teacher's computer, if that's what that means. Anything you can think of, John, that maybe that's pertaining to that I'm not thinking of?
No, I mean, we've worked, really closely with our IT department, and we've looked at the infrastructure within the building, both for MCAS last year, which didn't end up happening, but the ability for students to access the internet within the building is robust, and infrastructure-wise, I think we're in great shape. And if there are particular tech needs, whether apps or hardware for individual students, we're happy to support those as well.
Yep.
What's the needs?
And Dr. Scollins, you could talk a little bit about our sharing of Chromes, of course, if that was what it was referencing.
Right. So just like we did last year, we will be offering Chromebook loans for those that need them. And so if you need it, you can just email me at lscollins@cohassetk12.org, and I'll send you out a form to do that. One of the other things, we're looking at some other devices too, things like document cameras. They do exist in the district, but looking to see what we can do to really enhance what what we do with our kids when they're in remote and when they're in the classroom also. So we've applied for a tech grant, so we'll see how we do.
Yeah, we did. We applied for a pretty hefty tech grant, so all that will go into our plan here. When students are in person, will they move from classroom to classroom and have different teachers? For you, Principal Wills.
Yes, they will. The secondary school schedule is too complex to keep one group of kids together all day and have teachers simply move in and out. As you know, if your student's taking French or Spanish, right away there are different pathways. Our accelerated classes offer the same sort of challenges. So with our small groupings and then working on protocols with the teacher teams that stagger dismissal from the classrooms, we should be able to avoid or maintain social distance. We had also talked about looking at ways for students to be able to use their locker, but only a couple times during the day. And we're going to stagger the assignment of lockers so that a student from Group A, for instance, when they're standing at their locker, the lockers on either side would belong to students in Group B or nobody at all. So you would be able to maintain a minimum of 3 feet when you're at your locker. So to answer the question, it's a little bit like a long-winded answer, but no, our kids will move between classes, and certainly I want to keep them safe, but for their age, that little bit of movement is still, I think it's still really important, and I think we can do it safely.
Yeah, and of course, and this is really, I imagine, a safety question, and we are going to be making sure that we wipe down desks between classes, that we have students. We're hoping people bring these small hand sanitizers, the 2 fluid ounces. We'll have lots of them. My kids already have this like decorative things that kids can wear to house them, like a necklace. But anyway, the idea is that we're going to have students hand sanitizing before each class as they go into each class. So we'll have a whole protocol and directionals in the hallways of where to walk and where not to walk. So we're really thinking of everything we can to make sure that we maintain social distance, but also give them the experience of having a full curriculum. Next, will it be possible to request a shift in cohorts so that a student in the middle school can attend in person on the same bi-monthly schedule as his or her sibling at the high school? Yeah, right now we're listening, but right now in our draft we feel like the Division at the high school by grade level is best for scheduling purposes. So it might, and then we're, as Principal Mills said, it's more of an alphabetical split at the middle school. So we're really probably not going to be able to make many accommodations, or if any, in that, because whatever we decide on will be the way to go. And we want to make sure it's the best educational situation for our students. And we do understand nothing is perfect, but that's kind of where we are right now. Is there a plan for students on the 504 plan? Well, we'll follow the 504 plan. So whatever the 504 plan says, we will follow, and we will implement those accommodations as needed. How will tests be taken? This was asked last night too, John. I don't know if you have a thought about tests.
Yeah, and certainly as we began the school year last year, nobody pictured the challenges that teachers and students would face, and with creativity and a willingness to experiment, we got through remote learning. Assessment's going to be the same thing, and of course, assessments, quizzes, tests. It depends on the content area. It also depends on the material. I think, if I were a classroom teacher, I might, if I was going to give out a conventional sort of traditional quiz or test, I might plan on doing 2 versions and quiz or test my, in-person cohort on Friday. And then when the next cohort comes in next week, do theirs face-to-face on Monday. So it's still, it's still timely for them, and it prevents one group from having any kind of advantage. But that's, once again, that's trying to create a situation to substitute, into the situation that we have now. I think what you're going to see is, well, teachers are going to end up modifying and really reforming the way they assess learning. You might see more open-ended essays, or for instance, like a writing prompt that requires the students to use the content in a creative or novel way, as opposed to the traditional multiple choice or fill in the blank quiz or test. And to be honest, it's going to take some learning by both our teachers and our students. But I think what we potentially could get to is a higher level of both instruction and learning. And I'm really excited about, the solutions that our teachers come up with. So it's going to look a little bit different over time. But
another question about sorry, John, another question about the makeup of what classes will be like. Will there be separate accelerated and college prep, or it's called regular classes here? So.
Yeah, we were able to maintain our schedule as it runs normally, as far as the courses that we're offering in this hybrid model, having only half of the students in person and the other half remote and alternate. We're maintaining the schedule exactly, as we planned for this year. So our accelerated math and ELA in 7th and 8th will be run. Our band courses, our chorus classes, everything is going to be as it has been in the past.
With the proper safety accommodations around it. So I just want to say, like, there are some questions maybe I'm not answering exactly right. Like, is the one about the 504, I'm reflecting and maybe I didn't answer that properly. So if that person wants to email me separately, just so I understand exactly what you were asking, I will be glad to help you with that. And goes for any of these questions. Nice, thank you for all your hard work. Will there be any sort of orientation for the 6th graders entering middle school, since the schedule is different from what they have known?
Yeah, we're looking at different options to have kids visit the building safely before school starts, and then as our year begins, it's going to start with a couple of days with much smaller groups, so the teachers and the kids can kind of get used to the new model. I think in the past, the way we've run a 6th grade incoming 6th grade orientation, we're looking at having to modify that and make it safe. But yeah, we very much want our 6th graders when school begins to feel comfortable and that they get what's going on and that it's their school.
Yeah, we're going to take measures with everyone to make sure that they feel comfortable with this new format, and that goes for parents. Of course, we always have a special spot as a middle school educator for a sixth grader coming in because it's such a change. So we'll look at that. There was a question about protocols. So can you please review the protocol if a student or a staff member tests positive? What is the protocol for contact tracing and quarantine? Great question. In the guide that I sent you, actually is a bunch of scenarios. So if you go and you look at that in the guide and you go into the commissioner's guidance, it really walks us through this. The main thing is that we're working very closely with our health officials in town here, and that we have what we're calling sort of isolation or sick rooms. We have to come up with a better title than that, by the way, but a place where we can put a student who might have a symptom that may be COVID-like away from a student who might be in because they fell down in a gym class or something and scraped a knee. So it's really separating those two. We do a whole protocol for making sure that we have the proper emergency contact to have a parent come in and get a student. And then there are protocols that will be put in place working with our health officials to put people on a quarantine or whatever it might be, isolation, regarding if they have it or don't have it. And then there's the whole process of identifying folks who may have been exposed to something and working with our health official who will do the contact tracing and will do the communication regarding that. So there are all of those protocols, and literally, as I'm looking at it over here, there's protocols for student or staff who test positive for COVID-19, protocol for close contact of student or staff who test positive, student is symptomatic on the bus, student is symptomatic at school, staff is symptomatic at home, staff is symptomatic at school, process for multiple cases in a school. It goes right down the line, and we're going to follow them right by the book and make sure that we have a process for communication and we have a hierarchy and chain of command, and we do. We're notifying the proper people, all keeping as much confidentiality as we can, for making sure we follow all the proper steps, and of course following HIPAA rules. What will lunch look like? Will students have assigned seats for lunch? Will they have an opportunity to go outside? And just the last part of that, we're going to take opportunities to go outside when we can. It's not a permanent solution, obviously, because of weather and because of certain conditions and the size of tents we need and all of that, but they are going to be very important parts of our day. And it's an important part for kids to get out anyway. So I think there's a lot of benefit to have with this. And as far as lunch goes, and I'm going to let Principal Mills cover this one, but there are set guidelines for the way we can set students in a lunchroom to make sure they have proper distance and can take off their mask, because obviously they need to do that when they eat. But as a student reminded me, and we had students all through our teams to develop our plans, when I was talking about really strict guidance around how, she reminded me that, she said, Dr. Sullivan, remember that it's a really social time for us when we go to lunch. We want to be able to have some conversations with our classmates. So we're going to attend to that as well and figure out really inventive ways to make sure it's a social experience for them with keeping in that format. So I'll let Principal Mills talk about the specifics of it though.
Yeah, as we did our pressure test for our building, as I mentioned in the classrooms, we also did it for the cafeteria. And if we attempt to have lunch with the current long tables, if you've been in our cafeteria and you can picture the long rectangular tables and assorted round tables, we would only really be able to get just a scant minority of our kids in for lunch, and we would have to, it would be extremely disruptive to the school day and run multiple lunches between the middle school and high school. What we're going to do is we're looking at removing those long tables and replace them with individual student desks. We'll be able to maintain the 6 feet, minimum of 6 foot distance, and that's going to allow kids to be able to take off their masks and eat, which is an important mask break during the day. As we've done last year, Dr. Salas and I will make sure that the kids have a little bit of time at the end to, last year it was a joke session with our sixth graders, and it actually was the highlight of my day. For this year, what we're going to look at is using that upper field for our kids to get outside and be able to walk, move around, experience the fresh air. With the 6 foot distance, they'd be able to take off their masks and have that little bit of social time with their friends. If they're going to be closer than 6 feet, they would have to maintain the masks. So our lunch will obviously, it's going to look a little different, but it's going to allow kids a mask break. It's going to allow kids some safety, some outdoor time. And we talked about dismissal, unless it's an absolute downpour or a snowstorm, that we're going to dismiss through the back door, walk along the back of the school, and then re-enter in the academic hall with the general ed hallways by the science classroom, so that even if kids choose to stay in, they'll still have that little bit of break where they can get outside. So it's a different lunch. Our food service people are setting up grab and go. And it's going to look a little bit different, but I feel comfortable that in saying that we're going to be able to maintain safety and safe distance and not lose sight of the fact that they are still kids and they do enjoy one another.
One thing I should say, and I didn't mention this in the other two forums, is that we will have lunch available for our fully remote students, anybody who is in that mode, because that's appropriate as well. A question about symptom screening. Symptom screening probably should be active. Any progress on a phone app-based affirmative screening process? So the commissioner actually is, in his group, is not recommending we do any type of temperature screening at doors, if that's kind of sort of a subtext of this question, because of false readings, and there's some data on that in the actual document. The role of the family is crucial in symptom screening, and I want to make that really clear, that we're going to be, by basically coming into the building, you're going to be pledging that you're going to be very adamant and very active in looking at your students' health. And of course, our staff will be working with that as well to make sure that if we see symptoms that we're following the proper protocol, bringing that person to the isolated area that would be a sick place where that person could wait safely before he or she was dismissed. We have looked at some phone-based screening process. Right now, it would be more of just an affirmation that you were symptom-free and that you were coming symptom-free to school. But again, we have to be careful of all kinds of confidentiality information with those apps. So, you know, we're working on it, but like I said, we're going to be looking for symptoms if they come about, and we have a protocol for dealing with it if it does occur, and we're going to be asking families to really double down on helping with that. We talked about, will students move from class to class? Thank you for all of your hard work and dedication. I don't want to give that away here. Oh, just thank you. That was very nice. If you have 6th grader on the bus and also have an 8th grader, why can't the family members ride together? Simply because we don't have the space on the buses right now. And it's a tough situation that if you stop making those accommodations, where do you stop? You know, we have to abide by the law, and we're doing that. And if we go beyond that, how do you equitably determine who can ride a bus and who can't without doubling and tripling our bus fleets? So we looked at all that. We're still looking. Nothing's totally sealed yet, but I'm just being honest. That doesn't appear to be a thing we're going to be able to do at this point. Has the idea of mainly academics for the in-person week and mainly extracurricular for remote learning time come up? Well, I'll just answer from a district perspective is that we really invested in our educating of the whole child. So although some of the specialist subjects do lend themselves very well to multiple modalities, and we're keeping that in mind as we go, we certainly don't want to make a value judgment here. But all of us are looking at the best schedule for our kids overall. I don't know, Principal Mills, if there was any thought that went into that kind of balance.
Yeah, we did examine it, but we really came back to that commitment to the whole child and full education. There are the absolute, general education classes are critical, but to be honest, we have some students who come into school and the only reason they do is so that they can get to their art class or build in STEM, or be able to perform in music and be around our music teachers. So in order to support all our kids and to be as fully developed as possible, we chose to commit to all our maintaining all our subject areas.
Good. Thank you, John. Point about eye protection. Eye protection is probably somewhat important in protection against infection. Face shields can also can help keep hands away from mucous membranes and the masks. Consideration of use of face shields. So face shields right now are being recommended as a mitigating factor, but not, as you're saying here, but not as a replacement for an actual mask. We do have these ordered for our staff who will be more intensively involved in providing services, such as maybe a speech pathologist, for instance. I always give that example because maybe they're closer than a person would be typically helping a student. And they actually have quite a lot of what we call PPE, or personal protective equipment. It includes a gown and a mask and a face shield. And so that's provided. We're clearly going to be careful and be mindful. We do have some ordered, mainly for staff in dealing with situations, but not necessarily exclusively for staff. So we're going to look at scenarios where that eye protection might be needed, and if that's the case, we'll order more. But we do have a stock of it. So anyway, that's probably my best answer for that for now. If a member of the family tests positive, does the student switch over to remote learning? We would follow the guidance from our health official in town. But if that student is deemed not appropriate to come back to school, then yes, we would be able to afford a remote learning situation until it was deemed safe by the health official for that person to return. Is it possible that students might be in class, in capital letters, yet the teacher has decided to teach remotely only? So they will essentially sit in school at desks and watch a Zoom lesson. We haven't really crossed that yet. I mean, we're going to have situations with staff, and we're going to have to deal with that as well. And they're obviously try to help with anything we can help with. I guess it's a possibility if we had but of course you need supervision. You can't let a middle schooler alone in a room for sure. So I mean, you can't let any student alone in a room for sure. You're going to have supervision there. So we could potentially flip that, but right now we're not looking at that as a way we're going to go about things. Is there a place to educate outdoors with remote temporary trailers, possibly large tents on the athletic fields? Yeah, like I said, I mean, the trailers are first of all very expensive. Not that that's we're going to try to look for the best thing we can do, but they're also small comparatively, so you really can't put too many kids in them, just as you can't put them in a classroom. And then you have the supervisory aspect of you're going to be supervising over multiple classrooms. I don't know. We looked at that and we don't see how beneficial that would be. The large tents, they can be beneficial. We are going to try to get some tents, but again, if you really think about what a class looks like out there with all the accommodations you have to have for students who need those accommodations, probably not a realistic model for a long-term solution. Certainly for breaks, for certain days when the day is appropriate, yeah, that would be good. And we are going to look at some of those things. But if this question is looking at it as a way of bringing all of our students back, which I'm not sure it is, we don't really see that as a viable model. But yeah, we're going to use them for sure. And that's a good point. Can we suspend band and chorus to make a longer lunch? A break from the stress for the kids. Maybe the wind instruments are more risky also under the circumstances. So I'll take the back part of that first. The guidance is very explicit that just came out. And that's the guidance, by the way, which I sent you the day after I sent the big document. It does very much talk about what the social distancing needs to be and safety measures in each of these classes, including wind and brass instruments. And they are more stringent than in other places, other classes. But as far as suspending band and chorus to make a longer lunch, we're not looking at that at this point. As Principal Mills said, a lot of our students really, that is the break from stress for them. It's to be in those classes where they're trying to find, what they're about. So yeah, I don't know. Anything you want to add to that, Principal Mills?
No, you said it well. Um, the same could be said, our health and wellness classes, it's the same thing. There are some students that, really need the creativity, the creative opportunities that art and music presents to them. And there are some students that, if it wasn't for a PE class, they go a little crazy. They need time to get out and move around. So we're maintaining all of that in our schedule. We'll still be able to maintain a 30-minute lunch. And from eating with the kids every day, our kids tend to, eat in 12 to 17 minutes. And then I'm confident that they're going to have some time to take advantage of the field out back and the opportunity to get outside and move around a little bit. I totally respect the creativity and thinking outside the box, because I think that's really important at this time.
Me too. No, I love all of these are great ideas, great questions. They're very helpful. Another question about moving groups to moving to different classrooms or staying in the same classroom. I think we covered that. Who should we notify if we don't need a bus? Well, a survey was sent out to all students K through 6 outside of 2 miles. That was the second survey. If you receive that, you are in that category, and you should indeed have answered that. If you don't need a bus, you wouldn't need to notify us at all at this stage. What is the procedure for families who choose to homeschool and not the hybrid or remote? What will you require from families? I'll let Dr. Scollins talk about that, because it's a homeschooling question more than a remote learning question.
If you are thinking about homeschooling your child, you can email me. I'll send you the paperwork for that. We have a policy from the school committee around, what's the expectation. But if you are going to consider homeschooling, you would need to fill out the forms, which really have you explain what curriculum you're going to be using, how you're going to assess your child, what materials and resources you're going to use. That comes into my office, and then I approve it or not, or we talk about what things need to be added to the program. And then at the end of the year, you send in your assessments, and we move your child to the next level or not. But normally it's usually a pretty good process. And we don't have a lot, probably about 10 families a year that normally would do homeschooling.
What if one child qualifies for busing, but the other does not, i.e. a 6th and an 8th grader? Yeah, I know. These are tough answers for me, because we're at this point, we'd only be able to afford the busing to that 6th grader. And that would be something that you'd have to consider in your plans for the bus, for transportation. What happens if a child is sent home sick with COVID symptoms, such as a cough? Does that child take a test before returning to school? Well, they'd be asked to see their health official, their doctor, and we'd wait for information regarding that. What happens with the remaining students in the meantime? This is a little tricky, of course, because symptoms that are COVID are not necessarily COVID, because they're similar symptoms. We're going to work with all of our health officials to make those determinations as we go. But really, this is more of a medical question that we'll lean on our nurses and, of course, our district doctor, district physician, which, by the way, I'm setting up a Zoom for families with the district physician. His name, Dr. Golden. Some of these questions would be really good for him, but we would immediately take cues from our health officials. Will there be the opportunity to see the teachers after school for extra help? Yeah, I don't see why there wouldn't. I mean, it would be on appointment by the teacher, of course, and it would be in the same social distanced way that classes are held. Will buses be free? Buses are free for students who are K to 6, correct, outside of 2 miles. Thanks for all you're doing. Will class sizes be capped? Well, they will, in that we need to fit them in safely. But John, you want to talk about that? There's actually, just so you know, there hasn't been a restriction on spaces and the amount of kids you can put in a space, as long as you can physically distance them appropriately. But I'll let John answer the question, because I think the hybrid helps a bit.
Yeah, we're now working on the master schedule, and with an eye towards keeping the classes as evenly keep the enrollments even between the sections, so that in a hybrid model, we're not looking at one class having normally 30 or 35 kids. So even in a hybrid situation, there's still too many. We're looking at keeping all the numbers down, and we'd like to keep it at a 12 or 13 in a class.
And then the next question is about, and maybe I'm waiting for a question for you, Barbara. I don't know why this one hasn't hit you yet, but this isn't one. What tech training will teachers receive? Some really struggle with Zoom. Well, one thing I want to mention here is that what we did in the spring, I think it's really aptly termed pandemic learning. That was a term coined by Peter DeWitt, who was a really nice instructional leader. And because it was, we were trying to, it was changing constantly, and we were trying to, we weren't prepared for it, as you know, and nor was anyone. So this is a much different scenario where we're able to prepare for what will happen in remote learning. So Dr. Scholars, you want to talk about any of the training that we're hoping to put in place?
Sure. And, I do want to say too, a lot of teachers are doing a lot of training on their own. There were several teachers involved in some Google training this summer, also Zoom training. I'm getting all sorts of certificates that they just got today on learning how to use Zoom and breakout rooms. So they're doing a lot of it on their own, but we've also created and contracted with EdTech Teacher, and they are going to provide training for our staff around Google Classroom, remote learning, and what does that look like, and how do you work in that kind of environment, and how do you teach in that environment, as well as how do you create and design lessons that are engaging for students within that world. It is very different. It's not the same as if you're in a classroom. So we'll be working, we have those scheduled, and we'll continue that throughout the year, because we want to kind of front load things if we can as much as possible. But once you get into it, you're going to have more questions. So we're working with the IT committee and also the professional development committee to kind of think about what kinds of things do teachers really need. We just sent them a survey, and we're going to meet tomorrow morning and look at the data to see what additional things do they need, not just in technology, but obviously you can imagine there's a lot of desire to have some more technology.
Okay. So thank you. So I'm gonna ask Barbara a quick question, because I know there's a lot of people will have this. Can you, Barbara, can you talk a little bit about IEPs and how we will work with students on individual education plans as we move into a hybrid model?
Sure. So, when we were in the spring and we were in that pandemic learning, a lot of the support that you got was kind of like resources and support, in addition to some real, services and learning. And this time around, the plans are going to be much more robust. They are going to be service and learning plans, much like the learning that Mr. Mills has talked about has been, real scheduled learning, following the class schedule, things like that. Special ed services are all going to be upheld. So whatever services are on the IEP, they will be delivered. Now, sometimes they will be delivered live if the student is in the cohort that is in school at the time. Some of them may be delivered synchronously. Some of them may be delivered asynchronously. But those services will be delivered, and that is something that, has come from the guidance from the state, something that we are very committed to, and, you can feel confident that that is going to be happening.
Thank you, Barbara. I know that was probably down there later. So we're actually over time, but I'm going to do just kind of a little speed round of some of the questions here, and then we'll end in just a moment. But again, you can always email me or Principal Mills or any of us if you have specific questions. Will there be, this is a question about just from that same person, but she has a student, or he is a student in 6th and 8th grade. The surname begins with M. Will our girls be on the same rotation or potentially separate weeks?
At the middle school?
Yeah, you don't have to tip your hat to from we're going to be getting that out in the next couple of weeks anyway. But I guess the idea is, will siblings at the middle school be on the same schedule?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Will there be MCAS in 2021? Right now, it's planned, although there's a lot of chatter about that, so we will see. Just confirming, 6th graders will be 1 week on, 1 week off, like the rest of middle school, but we'll have bus services, correct?
Mm-hmm.
6th graders outside of a 2-mile radius from the school, and they'll be on the same schedule, yes.
Can we, I know it's part of the speed round, but I do want to point out for people that with only the sixth graders taking the buses to school and the morning being, you know, a bustling time for families, that we're looking at having the middle school drop off occur at the front of the school. We're only going to have 2 buses coming in and out. So our middle school parents who are dropping off will be able to pull up the main driveway, go to the left by the auditorium, drop off at the end of the, you know, right by the entrance to the middle school, and then loop around and depart that way. If you've got a middle schooler and a high schooler, the high school is dropping off at the back the way we did it last year. Your choice, you can drop off at either door. We're happy to have a high schooler come in, or if you want to leave your middle schooler in the back, I would say whichever line is shorter. That's fine.
And we're gonna have protocols for how we enter the building, masks if needed for students at the building. And of course, there's already hand sanitizer all over the place, put up on walls and on the buses, just so you know, already. Okay, about changing classes, we got that. Will middle school students stay with the same group of 10 to 12 kids throughout the whole day? John?
No, they'll be mixed between classes. So each class will have 10 or 12 kids, but then those will mix a little as they go from one class to another. You
Right.
might be with a friend in your math class at the end of the period. You go to Spanish, she goes to French. So there is a little bit of change that way.
I'm just looking at these questions. I think we've hit almost all of them. What will lunch look like? What, are they switching classes, staying in the same class? How does lunch, what will the lunchroom look like? Will standardized testing occur? We talked about that. Some ideas about additional detail on remote classes. Will there be pre-recorded lectures and meetings with teachers? Kind of a little of both.
Both, probably.
Yep. Last spring is a challenge working remote for students because they had information in different areas of Google Classroom, but it'd be possible to have an online agenda so the teachers can add classwork and links for each student. And yeah, and we're going to be looking at making that's part of the robust model where no matter what we do, it's going to mirror the school day. And that's at all levels, I should say. We're really mirroring the school day as opposed to in that pandemic learning, we weren't doing that. Required to use lockers, we talked about it. I think we got most of them. All right. Well, at that point, we went a little bit over, but I think it was worth it. Hopefully we answered somebody's question that we may not have gotten to. And I want to thank Principal Mills, Barbara, our new Director of Student Services, thank you. And of course, Dr. Scollins, thank you. And thank you all out there for everything you do, make Cohasset a wonderful place. We promise we'll keep working diligently. And we'll keep safety at the forefront. You know, we're not done listening and we're not done planning. So this is a really important step along the way. So thank you all. Have a wonderful night and talk to you soon.